Is this really how you do your job? No wonder you're stuck here, barely making minimum wage. I froze, gripping the cash register so tightly my knuckles turned white. The customer, a middle-aged woman in an expensive coat, stood across from me, her lips twisted into a sneer. Her designer bag rested on the counter like a symbol of power, a contrast to my worn-out apron and tired face. "I'm sorry, ma'am," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "There must have been a mistake with the order. Let me fix it." Her eyes flicked over me like I was dirt beneath her feet. "No wonder you people never get anywhere in life. You can't even do the simplest job right." The humiliation burned deep, but I wasn't the only one hearing this. Customers in line had started whispering. My manager, Derek, stood nearby, arms crossed, enjoying the show. I wasn't expecting a rescue. Not today. Not ever. But what I didn't know, someone unexpected was watching. And he wasn't just another customer. He was the CEO of the company. Laughter. Not from me. Not from kindness. From Derek. My manager, a man who should have stepped in, who should have at least pretended to care about his employee, chuckled under his breath. "You heard her, Mia," he said, shaking his head. "Try not to embarrass yourself in front of the customers." More laughter. More whispers. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced them down. I needed this job. My little girl, Lily, depended on me. So I swallowed my pride and apologized to the woman who clearly enjoyed watching me squirm. "I'll fix it right away," I said, voice steady. Then for the first time I noticed him. A man at the back of the line.
Tall.
Dark hair. Sharp, calculating eyes.
He didn't speak. Didn't step in.
But he was watching everything. And something about his expression told me he wasn't just another bystander. I corrected the order with shaking hands, sliding the woman's receipt toward her. She smirked.
"See?
Was that so hard?" I bit my tongue.
Stay calm.
Stay professional. But then, she turned to Derek and said, "I don't know how you put up with these kinds of employees. If I were in charge, I'd fire her on the spot." Derek laughed. And that's when the man at the back of the line spoke. Interesting. One word. The kind that makes a room go silent. The arrogant customer turned, frowning at him. "Excuse me?" The man stepped forward. His presence was commanding. "The kind you don't ignore." I said it's interesting, he repeated, his tone cool. "How quick you are to humiliate someone who's just trying to do their job. I wonder how you'd feel if someone treated you the same way." The woman bristled. "And who do you think you are?" His lips curled into a dangerous smirk. "Me," he said, stepping closer. "I'm the man who owns this company." Silence. Pure, deafening silence. Derek went pale. The woman's jaw slackened. "You're lying," she stammered. The man, the CEO, didn't even blink. "Try me." I stood frozen, my pulse hammering. And then, in a voice laced with quiet authority, he turned to me. "What's your name?" I swallowed hard. "Mia. Mia Carter." He nodded, as if memorizing it. Then, with the same deadly calm, he looked at Derek. "And you? You're the manager here?" Derek forced a laugh. "Oh, sir, yes, but—" "I see." The CEO cut in, his voice dropping to something that commanded obedience. "And tell me, Derek, is this how you run my store? By standing back while your employees are bullied?" Derek stuttered. The woman clutched her designer bag, now looking desperate to escape. But the CEO wasn't finished. Because this was only the beginning. I didn't think," Derek stammered. The CEO cut him off. "No, you didn't think." His voice was sharper now, controlled but deadly. "And that's your first mistake." My hands were trembling. Was this real? Was I dreaming? No one had ever stood up for me like this. The CEO turned his gaze to me. "Mia," he said, and something about the way he said my name made my stomach flip. "Do you enjoy working here?" I swallowed. I need the job." His jaw tightened, as if that answer bothered him. "That's not what I asked," he said quietly. I hesitated. Then, with more honesty than I meant to give, I whispered, "No." His eyes darkened. And then, to everyone's shock, he turned to Derek and said, "You're fired." Gasps filled the store. Derek sputtered. "Sir, please, The CEO held up a hand. "I don't tolerate managers who let employees be abused. You're done." Derek turned red, but he knew. He knew there was no saving himself. He stormed out without another word. The arrogant customer shrank back, desperate to disappear. And then the CEO turned back to me. "Mia," he said, his tone gentler now. "I'd like to talk to you. In private." My breath hitched. Because for the first time in forever, I wasn't being ignored. I wasn't being walked over. I was being seen. But I had no idea that this conversation would change my life forever. I followed the CEO, still reeling from what had just happened. My feet felt like lead, my breath uneven. Was this real? Had he actually fired Derek on the spot? He led me into a private office at the back of the store, closing the door behind him. The air felt charged, heavy with something unspoken. "Sit," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I hesitated before lowering myself into the chair across from him. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed, watching me carefully. "You've been working here for how long?" he asked. 2 years, I murmured, still feeling like I was in some kind of fever dream. His sharp eyes narrowed slightly. "And in those 2 years, how often have you been treated like that?" I stiffened. I could lie. Pretend it was just today, just an isolated incident. But something in his gaze told me he already knew the answer. I swallowed hard. "Too often." His jaw tightened. "And no one did anything?" A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Derek encouraged it. He treated me like I was disposable. And if customers did the same, well, that was just good business, wasn't it? Something flickered in his expression. Something dangerous. "You have a child, don't you?" he asked suddenly. I stiffened again. "How do you?" "I did my research while waiting in line," he admitted. "Looked at the employee records. You're a single mother, struggling to make ends meet. And yet, you've been treated like garbage in my own company." I blinked rapidly, trying to process the sheer insanity of this moment. Then, in a voice calm but final, he said, "That ends today." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He pushed off the desk, stepping closer. "I mean, you deserve better than this. And I intend to make sure you get it." My heart pounded. "Are you offering me a promotion?" A slow smirk crossed his lips. "I'm offering you something much bigger than that." I swallowed hard. "I don't understand." He exhaled, studying me. "I run this company, Mia. And I don't just sit in an office all day. I see what happens at the ground level. And when I do, I find people like you, people who work hard, who are mistreated, who deserve better." I clenched my hands together. "Why me?" "Because you didn't deserve what happened today," he said simply. "And because I have a feeling you're stronger than you think." I bit my lip. "And what exactly are you offering?" His blue eyes burned into mine. "A job," he said. "A real job. In my corporate office. Double your salary. Full benefits for you and your child. And a chance to never be walked over again." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't real.
It couldn't be.
I had spent my life struggling, barely scraping by. And now, a man like him was offering me a way out? I should have been ecstatic. But instead, a terrifying thought whispered in my mind. What if this is too good to be true? Why? The word escaped before I could stop it. The CEO raised an eyebrow. "Why what? Why are you doing this?" My voice was quiet, but firm. "People like me don't get lucky. No one just walks in and hands them a way out. So why?" Something flickered in his eyes. Something deeper. "I know what it's like," he said finally. "To have the world step on you. To be told you'll never be more than what you are." I inhaled sharply. He wasn't just talking about me. I could hear the weight in his voice, the kind of weight that only comes from experience. And suddenly I realized, the man standing before me hadn't always been a CEO. I leaned forward. "You weren't always rich, were you?" A humorless smirk tugged at his lips.
No.
I started at the bottom. I scrubbed floors, served coffee, got yelled at by customers who thought they were better than me. Something sharp twisted inside me. So when I see someone like you, he continued, someone who reminds me of where I came from, I don't ignore it. My throat felt tight. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. And in that moment, staring at the man who had just changed my life,
I did.
the next morning, I walked into a corporate office instead of a greasy fast food joint. It didn't feel real. I had spent years wearing a stained apron, smelling like fryer oil. Now, I stood in a sleek skyscraper, clutching a folder with my name on it. And waiting for me at the entrance was him. Ready for your first day? He asked. I inhaled deeply. For the first time in forever, I actually was. Stepping into the corporate office felt like walking onto another planet. The air smelled like expensive cologne and fresh coffee, not stale fryer oil. The people here weren't in stained uniforms. They were in designer suits and high heels, carrying sleek tablets instead of greasy trays. And then there was me. I tugged at my secondhand blazer, feeling entirely out of place. The CEO, Nathaniel Carter, as I'd learned his name was, walked beside me like this was just another day. But for me, this was terrifying. Relax, Nathaniel said, as if sensing my tension. You belong here. I doubted that. And the glares I was getting from employees only made it worse. But I wasn't going to back down. I had fought too hard to be here. Miss Carter, you'll be working under me. Nathaniel's voice was smooth, professional. But the moment he said it, I heard the whispers. The jealous ones. The CEO brought her in himself? Who even is she? Probably his secret girlfriend. Heat rushed to my face, but Nathaniel didn't seem fazed. Instead, he gestured toward a glass-walled conference room filled with top executives. You're about to meet the people who run this company, he said. Be yourself. You'll be fine. I nodded, swallowing my nerves. Then I stepped inside. And the real war began. The moment I entered, I knew they didn't respect me. The boardroom was filled with polished, high-ranking executives, people who had spent their lives climbing the corporate ladder. I was a nobody, a fast food worker who had been plucked off the floor, like some kind of charity case. And they all saw it. So, Miss Carter, one man sneered, tapping his pen against the table. I hear you used to serve fries. What exactly qualifies you to work here? Laughter. Quiet, but sharp. My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression neutral. Nathaniel, however, his eyes turned cold. If you have an issue with my hiring choices, Daniel, he said smoothly, I'd be happy to discuss your own qualifications. Silence. Daniel paled. The room shifted. And for the first time I saw it, the power Nathaniel wielded. The meeting continued, but the tension remained. Afterward, I gathered my notes, hyper-aware of the judgmental stares. But just as I stepped into the hallway, I heard two executives whispering behind me. She won't last a week. Probably sleeping with him. I froze. My nails dug into my palm. I wanted to turn around, to fight back. But I knew better. This wasn't a fast food job. This was war. And I would fight it smartly. Nathaniel called me into his office later that day. You heard them, didn't you? He asked. I nodded stiffly. They think I don't belong here. His expression hardened. They're wrong. I scoffed. Easy for you to say. You built this company. I'm just a charity case you plucked off the floor. Nathaniel leaned forward, his gaze intense. You are not a charity case, Mia. His voice was sharp, unyielding. I didn't bring you here out of pity. I brought you here because I saw something in you. I swallowed. What did you see? I whispered. His lips twitched slightly. Someone who refuses to stay down. A shiver ran down my spine. Because for the first time, I believed him. By the next week, things got worse. Emails went missing. Documents I was supposed to review were replaced with incorrect versions. It wasn't an accident.
Someone was sabotaging me.
And I had a good idea who it was. Daniel, the executive who had humiliated me in the meeting, smirked every time I struggled. His assistant wouldn't even look me in the eye. I was being set up to fail. But they underestimated me. Because I wasn't going anywhere. I stayed late, triple-checking every document. I started recording conversations, keeping track of who handed me what. And then one night, I caught Daniel red-handed. I walked into the office and saw him switching files on my desk. He looked up, freezing. I crossed my arms. I guess we finally know who's been trying to get rid of me. His face darkened. You don't belong here, Carter. I smiled sweetly. Let's see if Nathaniel agrees. Then I pulled out my phone where I had recorded everything. Daniel panicked. You wouldn't. Try me, I said coolly. By the next morning, the video was in Nathaniel's hands. And Daniel? He was gone. Nathaniel looked at me, impressed. You're learning fast. I smirked. I had a good teacher. That night, Nathaniel invited me to dinner. To celebrate, he said. But when I got there, it didn't feel like business. The restaurant was too intimate. His shirt was unbuttoned just enough. And the way he looked at me? Not like a boss. Like a man. I swallowed hard. This was dangerous. But when he whispered, "You did good today, Mia," in that low, husky voice, I forgot to breathe. Nathaniel's eyes lingered on me, the dim lighting of the restaurant casting shadows over his sharp features. I should have looked away. I should have reminded myself that he was my boss. But I didn't. Because in that moment, it wasn't about work, about power, about anything other than the way his voice dipped lower when he spoke to me, the way his fingers grazed mine when he handed me the wine glass. Mia, he murmured, leaning in just slightly. Tell me something. I swallowed hard.
What?
Do you regret saying yes to this job? I held his gaze.
No.
I didn't. But that wasn't the dangerous part. The dangerous part was that I didn't regret this either. This tension, this heat, this unspoken thing that neither of us wanted to name. Not even a little, I admitted. Nathaniel smirked. Good. But before I could process what was happening, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his entire expression changed. His jaw clenched. The easy charm in his eyes vanished. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. Nathaniel stood abruptly, excusing himself to take the call. I sat frozen, watching his back as he stepped away, voice sharp, dangerous. Who was on the other end of that phone? And why did it look like he was ready to kill someone? When he finally returned, his face was unreadable. We need to go, he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. I frowned. What happened? He exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. And then, in a voice low and controlled, he said, Someone inside the company is trying to take me down. I should have seen it coming. The sabotage. The way Daniel had so confidently tried to take me out. There was someone bigger pulling the strings. And now, Nathaniel knew exactly who it was. Nathaniel paced his office, hands fisted at his sides. They've been planting false reports, leaking internal documents, he muttered. They want to force me out. I tensed. Who? His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw it. Rage. Cold, merciless rage.
My own board, he said.
They think I've gone soft. I inhaled sharply. Because this wasn't just a corporate war anymore. This was personal. And I was caught in the middle of it. Nathaniel wasn't a man who lost. And yet, as I sat beside him, going over the falsified reports, the stolen documents, the pieces of his empire being ripped out from under him, I saw it. A man who wasn't just fighting for his company. He was fighting for his name, for his life's work, for revenge. And I was going to help him win. We spent the next week working nonstop, gathering evidence, tracing leaks, setting up a trap for the traitors. Nathaniel wasn't just powerful, he was brilliant. And when the moment came, he exposed them all. In a live meeting, with every single board member watching. You thought you could take me down? Nathaniel's voice was like ice. The guilty executives sat frozen, their secrets displayed for everyone to see. The room buzzed with tension. Nathaniel, He held up a hand, silencing them. Then, with a smirk so cold it burned, he said, You're fired. By the time the dust settled, Nathaniel had won. The company was his again. The snakes were gone. But as we stood in his office, staring out at the city, He let out a breath and said, "Power comes at a cost, Mia." I looked at him. And was it worth it? He turned to me, his gaze dark. Then, in a voice so soft and dangerous, he whispered, "Ask me again after I do what I really want to do." And before I could even breathe, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was fire. It was the clash of two people who had fought too hard, lost too much, and found everything in each other. When he pulled back, his breath was ragged. But his eyes? They were certain. "This wasn't just about the company, Mia," he murmured. I swallowed. "Then what was it about?" He cupped my face, smirking slightly. "You." I should have run. This was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But I didn't. Because the moment Nathaniel reached for me again, I let him. And as I kissed him back, I realized something. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. And it was just the beginning.